Okay, so my name is Ashley, and I did my research on reading disabilities. A student, according to the National Center for Learning Disabilities, who is considered to be reading impaired are students who score below the 30th percentile in basic reading. I thought that was just an important fact to know. Researchers have proposed that there are 3 different kinds of reading disabilities that you can potentially come in contact with throughout your career in teaching. You can see them in separate, distinct counterparts, or you can see them overlapping one another and even possibly being a mixture of all 3. The 3 kinds are language comprehension, phonological deficits, and fluency or naming speed. In language comprehension, you'll find that comprehension is the greater weakness. Your student may not seem to have a difficulty when reading and will not necessarily mispronounce many words, but they won't remember what they've read. They won't understand it. You might observe little feeling when they read, very little rhythm to their reading, and often just monotone voicing when they read aloud. In fluency, your student will exhibit a lack of just that, fluency. He or she will they will have trouble recognizing the words. They'll have trouble recognizing words promptly, making them have to spend a lot of time and frustration on decoding the words. Speed and fluency will not be up to par with the other students. And a phonological deficit, that is the core problem. The core problem is with processing oral language. These students will show difficulties in connecting the sounds of language to the letters and will exhibit obvious delays in reading. It's important to get out of the way necessarily what is the problem, but what is not. So it is not a sign of poor intelligence. These students will have average intelligence levels. These students are not lazy. They do not have a hearing impairment. They do not have a vision impairment, and it's not a result of poor instruction. You'll find that reading disabilities are often genetic as well as are a neurological disorder, causing the brain to process and interpret information differently. I kind of went over the warning signs, but here's a list of warning signs. They'll display slow reading rate. They'll have difficulty with accurate word recognition, decoding, and spelling. It'll hinder their reading comprehension. They'll have a very slow growth of vocabulary. It will not be up to par to the other students. Poor reading fluency. Letter reversal. They'll rely heavily on memorization. You'll see them confusing very similar words with other similar words, and they'll just have poor tracking skills. They'll not be able to track on the paper as well as other students do. To properly identify students with a reading disability, they'll need to be identified by a trained professional using a formal evaluation that looks at the ability to understand and use spoken and written language. At this, a lot of information, including personal history, IQ levels, the educational backgrounds that they have had, as well as the student's social environment, will be considered. Students with reading disabilities will benefit from explicit instruction by providing a detailed course syllabus and announcing reading assignments well in advance. The students can make use of that time in between and begin working on assigned readings and preparing themselves for success. Plan to provide them with written and oral overviews of what will be covered. Students with reading disabilities will benefit to have the information in writing to refer to, but to also have them explained orally. Just having it there to look back to after they've had it explained orally will help them process it much quicker. Make use of the technology that's available in your classroom to highlight the key concepts when teaching. This can be done on handouts as well as to help students focus more on the material that's being taught and less on the process of learning it. You don't want that reading disability to get in the way of actually learning the material as well. It'll benefit the student if you accept oral presentations in place of written assignments, but this is obviously a case-by-case basis, and it wouldn't hurt to have guided instruction just to ensure that the student is working towards progressing. Me personally, I wouldn't see myself always accepting oral presentations because that's not them working towards getting past their reading disability or working towards progressing in it. Extended time is valuable for not only the purpose of preparation, but the completion of the product without the stress of the time. And lastly, I've noted that the use of technological resources that they can take advantage of. My little brother currently does his reading at home a couple times out of the week by following along while it's being read to him, so that he can practice the word recognition as it's being read to him without putting the stressful work of being the first person to recognize these words. I've worked with students in the resource room that benefited heavily from me reading the paragraph to them first so that they could follow along, get an idea of what the paragraph's about, and then they were much more comfortable and familiar with the passage to read it back to me. They recognized the words much more quicker. I listed a couple of awesome resources. I highly suggest taking the time to really learn what it's like to have a reading disability. I've taken classes where we went through activities on the internet where words were just being jumbled right before your eyes. Some are disappearing as you're reading them, and it apparently it replicates the anxiety and panic that students feel when reading. I think that would be important to know and understand. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and I will do my best to answer them. Thank you.